Coming to you live from an abandoned storage locker somewhere in Mesa, Arizona. You're tuned into the Important Nonsense Podcast with Steve Bonham.
Attention, Alan Hearn's mom. His knee is better. You can stop worrying.
And Neil Smith.
Even with the concussion, as long as he's cleared, probably don't have a better option.
Ooh, boom shakalaka.
Welcome in. It is the Important Nonsense Podcast. Steve Bonham, Neil Smith. Neil, how are you doing this evening?
Oh, doing fine, just fine. And if you're listening to this, I commend you, because there's only one reason why you'd be listening to fantasy football stuff. Week 14, it's the final week of the regular season. So if you're still listening to us and looking at our smiling faces, it's because you're either playing for a playoff spot or you're playing for a better seed in the playoffs. So kudos to you for making it this far with us.
Yep, very much so. All right, Neil, what do you got on the docket for us today?
Oh, this week there's only one topic, Steve, because it's all anybody's going to care about. We're going to help you set those lineups here. We're going to break this down as best we can, and then obviously check in with the Friday show where they help you set those lineups every single week. But we're going to run through this here because there are some kind of news stories that we need to break down, some advice we need to give, and some situations that I think we're going to have some opinions on, just given how the oblong pigskin ball tends to bounce, right? It's a little unpredictable. So we'll do the non-RB stuff first, and then we'll do the running back stuff as its own separate special segment here. So what we'll do is as far as non-RB news, let's just start with a topic that you and I have probably beaten to death years gone by. It's a topic of great kind of contention within the fantasy community, and that's just the topic of Taysom Hill, just in general.
Wait, I thought you said non-RB news. See what I did there?
Yeah, but he'd be a tight end.
See what I did there?
Yeah, but he'd be a tight end, though.
Yeah, but he'd have to catch passes for that to happen.
But they were listing him as a tight end. Either way. Borderline quarterback, Taysom Hill.
Okay,
here.
Yeah.
And
possible quarterback. Yeah.
Theoretical quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny because a lot of people think we hate Taysom Hill. And it's funny because it's kind of a logical contradiction in that sense. Because you and I have both been on record as big Jalen Hurts believers.
Right.
And it's kind of a similar thing where it's like, well, how could you be so interested in Jalen Hurts with your analysis being, I don't care that he can't throw the ball. But then you turn around and it's like with Taysom Hill, no, we poo-poo that historically. Right. And it's like, no, because there's a difference. Jalen Hurts struggles to throw the ball, but has the capacity.
Right.
Taysom Hill is Tim Tebow with a slightly abbreviated throwing motion.
Right.
That's what there is a difference here in that. At least that's my analysis on the matter. But regardless, Taysom Hill still listed as a quarterback for most fantasy outlets. You can ride him as a quarterback, and there are individuals who will do so because of just the rushing floor, right? You and I, you don't have to explain that to us. We're pro rushing floor.
Yeah.
I'd like to get something that isn't just rushing floor, but okay. And I'd also like to deal with something that isn't throwing 4 interceptions in their last start. But hey, here's where we are. Because if you look at the ECR, at least to open the week, Taysom Hill was QB9. Mm-hmm. And even with the 4 interceptions, he put up 20 points in as a quarterback. So it's worth talking about here. But by his own admission, Taysom Hill is saying that he cannot grip the ball the way that he normally would. And he is having issues in practice spinning the ball in the way that he normally can. And so he's still learning this week how he's going to play with the splint that he has. So my question to you is, are we worried about using him as a streamer? What's the advice here that we want to help people out with? I'm not either, because I go back to what I was just saying. It's question asked and answered a little bit. He can't throw the ball anyway, so what do I care, realistically speaking?
Yeah, I'll give you the exact numbers. He hurt the finger in the first half, so he's playing with the splint the entire second half. So that's the easiest elimination right there, is just go by halftime, right? So in the first half, he had 144 yards passing. He was 12 of 21. In the second half, he was 7 of 20 with the splint on his finger for 120 yards. He had 1 touchdown and the 3 interceptions. Now, some of those were deflected off of receivers, weren't exactly his fault, but they still counted. What matters here, and the reason that Taysom Hill is in the conversation and is absolutely a streamer this week, is the fact that just in the second half, he had 89 rushing yards, When they were playing from behind, that was the only thing that they had going for them, was him running for his life with the ball. And I said it too when we were talking about the lead up to that game, the fact that not only is it Taysom Hill, not only do they have no Alvin Kamara, but half of their offensive line was missing from that game. So if anybody was going to run for his life, you would want it to be Taysom Hill. So it worked out in that regard. The fact that, like you're saying, he got 20 points and 10 of them were from rushing alone. So even if he didn't throw the ball at all, he still would have ended up with a decent day for you.
And we'll get into Alvin Kamara and his situation here in a little bit. But either way, we're undeterred here. He's absolutely a streamer. Start away. Frankly, if you're looking at streamers at this point, yeah. I mean, what else would you rather have? Like Tua? Like, or if he's on bye, like
he's on bye.
He's on bye. There's very little that's available even right now, given the buys and just what's out there. And you're not going to get somebody who might finish in the top 10, which Taysom Hill absolutely could.
Yeah.
So it's not something I want to invest in long term. But if you're asking me about streamers, absolutely for 1 week, and then we'll reassess.
Yeah, I guess it would depend on what's available on the waiver wire too, right? Like, because in the same neighborhood of the ECR you're talking about, would you rather have Taysom Hill or Kirk Cousins?
Yeah, and I'd rather have Taysom Hill temporarily, but it's really close. Floor? Yeah, the rushing floor, but it's really close. You're talking about like 9-10 or 10-11.
Yeah.
They're like right next to each other because they're going to get broadly the same, but it'll be totally different how they go about doing it.
Let's see. Same.
I prefer him over Derek Carr.
Cam Newton.
I prefer him over Derek Carr, Cam Newton. That's close too. That's close too because that's, well, as we've talked about with Cam Newton, that's kind of like the same thing.
Yeah, it's the exact same thing.
Yeah, that's
except
the same
Cam
thing.
actually can throw it a little bit, and he's going up against Atlanta's defense. So
yeah, hang on, I'll check my actual.
What's appealing about Taysom Hill too is the fact that they're playing the Jets.
I have them a little bit. That's the other reason too. I do have Taysom Hill in my. I have him like 2 spots higher. I have him 2 spots higher than Kirk Cousins and 3 whopping spots higher than Cam Newton. But that's your list. So yeah, to answer that, Taysom Hill by teeny touch. Yeah.
Okay.
I don't think there's too much more to say about that. If he's available and you need a quarterback, take a look.
Yeah, we were just talking streamers, so
probably don't watch the game.
Option.
Yeah, don't watch that game. Don't just enjoy the points at the end, and then we'll reassess next week. Speaking of kind of streamery type of things, Justin Fields is coming back on Sunday. So I don't think Justin Fields though would really qualify as a streamer. Like, for just going by my rankings, I would say no. He'd fall outside of what would be streamer territory going up against the Packers. I have a feeling they're really going to struggle in that game.
Right.
So I really don't. We got a lot of history on that mountain.
Yeah.
So really, the only
he still owns you.
He does, in fact, still own you. So the question that I would have then is just really around skill position guys.
Yeah.
With Justin Fields coming back, is there anything you're worried about individually, skill position wise? For the Bears. For the Bears. Yeah, I'm not either. So we'll talk about David Montgomery a little bit later, but it is worth bringing up because you're going back from Andy Dalton. So we're not worried about Mooney. And realistically, guys, that was the only skill position player you were going to consider starting as a flex.
Well, what I would say is as weird as it is, I like Cole Kmet less.
Okay.
If you've been playing or streaming Cole Kmet, the connection that he had with Andy Dalton was real. That's been his thing his entire career, is connecting with tight ends over the middle. And that has not been the connection with Justin Fields.
No, Justin Fields
was so widely available for a while there. So.
Justin Fields is really looking for Darnell Mooney, as we see more often than not. And Allen Robinson continues to kind of remain an afterthought. And he's hurt. You're probably not starting Allen Robinson. I can't imagine a league where you're doing that by choice. Yeah, right. Moving away from quarterback, that's really it at quarterback, frankly, for this week. Everybody else, you probably have your established guys at this point. So in reality, the next thing is we'll have to just talk about just a minor note here. Adam Thielen has already been ruled out for Thursday's game with the injury he suffered last week. So you're going to need to find some other options. Is there anybody in-house Minnesota that appeals to you? KJ Osborne, perhaps?
Yeah, I was going to say, you mean KJ Osborne?
Pretty much.
You're asking about?
Pretty much what I mean. Yeah.
Really fantastic question. I had not considered KJ Osborne.
He's the only one for me. And I know you're gonna look at some numbers up there, but He's the only one for me that I think would qualify. They're really like Tyler Conklin, maybe, but
what I would say for Conklin too is and it proved out last week as well that with Thielen out of the game, a lot of the underneath stuff went to Conklin, and especially the red zone.
That's why I was going to say, especially at tight end, given how bad tight end is right now.
Right, that's where that
Tyler
cash
Conklin.
is.
If you need a tight end, take a look because we already know Thielen's not going to play and it's a short week. So I could very much see a scenario where Tyler Conklin catches a touchdown for you. That's all you can hope out of your streaming tight end. So if you need a streamer tight end, I did move Tyler Conklin up in my rankings with the news that Thielen is not playing that entire game. So there is that. And then KJ Osborne is the question. Does it matter for KJ Osborne? And my answer is kind of like, how lucky do you feel?
Right.
Became the answer to that pretty rapidly. And that's not analysis typically, so I figured I would ask you.
So far this season, we really haven't had an opportunity to see what Osborne does without Adam Thielen. He had that big blow up game at the beginning of the year, but really has just fizzled since then. He hasn't done a whole lot with the opportunity. Currently in the ECR, he's sitting at wide receiver 40. So basically flex range.
Yeah, and that's kind of where you'd have to, given what we've seen, I think that's where you'd have to have him. You couldn't justify putting him any higher up than that.
Yeah,
so,
and he went 4 for 47.
No, if he went 7
targets.
for anything, we wouldn't be having this conversation.
But he went 4 for 47 on 7 targets, and he caught the touchdown when they were at the end of the game desperate. The 7 targets that he ended up getting were his most since week 6 against Carolina. So I don't know if he's going to get that kind of volume. It's hard to ignore, and you'd kind of have to play him. But the 5 games since their bye before this past week, he had a combined 11 points.
Yeah.
So to have a 14.7 in one game against Detroit.
So I'll tell you how I decided to rank it.
Mm-hmm.
I've got KJ Osborne at 43. And I'm pretty sure that was more or less in line with the ECR, at least at one point in time. It might have moved since the last time I updated this. But, and I looked at it, and the rationale is I've got him down there with guys like Amon-Ra St. Brown. Maybe you get the repeat. AJ Green, maybe you get lucky and he catches a touchdown in a game against the Rams where they might actually have to throw to him because they've got good enough coverage to do something about it. He's down there with Tim Patrick, which is always my perennial, maybe he catches a touchdown for you guy, although recently that's not been so much of a thing just because of how bad the whole Denver offense is. We could do a whole show on just whatever is wrong with that. What a nightmare. Our least listened to show ever is what that would be. So, and then, like Kenny Galladay is another, which is sad because how the mighty have fallen, but that's the neighborhood that I'm talking about. It's whatever order. Pick your order that appeals to you. But that's kind of where I ended up having to rank him, which is why I was like, well, at that point, he's a flex, and it does get down to how lucky do you feel. So if you needed an option.
Well, how lucky do you feel and how desperate are you?
Right.
It depends on what you've regularly been playing. There's not a lot on bye this week that is, locked and loaded starters for you because you've got
but if you've been riding
New England.
I was saying, if you've been riding Kendrick Bourne, if you've been on that train, you would need another option. Or if you've been riding whatever, something like that. Yeah. So not the worst 1 week flyer was how I kind of made it to. I'd rather deal with that than Josh Reynolds, which is one people seem to like. I'd rather deal with that than Laviska Shenault, which has been just hideously disappointing. I'd rather deal with that.
Yeah, at this point, I definitely would not play Laviska Shenault.
No, I wouldn't do that.
Mean, you poo-poo Josh Reynolds. I'd play Josh Reynolds over him.
Well, it's close. I'm just saying that's the neighborhood. But I'm saying in a world, okay. The reason I'm going with that example is in a world where we're talking about Josh Reynolds. Yeah. How you'd have to be talking about KJ Osborne. It's kind of the same thing. And I'm not poo-pooing Josh Reynolds, out of hand completely, but it's, at least I don't think I am. Apparently you're telling me that I'm way off on what I think of Josh Reynolds.
Well, I mean, the 2 games that he's legitimately played, granted it's against Chicago and Minnesota. Okay. So it's not like it's world-class secondaries. And they're playing Denver this week.
That's the other part of that doesn't make me smile.
But he had 5 targets in that first game against Chicago, ended up with 16 points. He ended up with a 10.9 this past week in the win against Minnesota. And Jared Goff was actively looking for him on that final drive until he started to connect with Amon-Ra St. Brown, who they just kept leaving wide open. And that ended up like saving his entire fantasy day. But even if you took away the touchdown in that Chicago game, he still would have put up a 10. So he's put up double-digit fantasy points in back-to-back games when he's been with Detroit, and there's no reason to think they won't continue to be throwing the ball this week.
They're going to have to, right?
I think he's got a 10-point floor at this point. I mean, if Josh Reynolds is a bench guy on your team, he should probably be a starting flex for you. I've got him ranked at 32.
Okay, so that's the difference right there. Is that you've got Reynolds significantly higher, so you're definitely more on the. Okay, interesting. All right. Well, I'm glad we cleared that up for the listening audience then. So what I would say is, to me, it's kind of a push, and I know you would say Josh Reynolds for sure.
I think he's surpassed St. Brown as the alpha. Now, again,
that was easy to do.
Right, but after that final drive, it's difficult to make that leap. But
that's why I have them kind of close together. Is kind of the thing, a little closer together in my rankings between Reynolds and Amon-Ra St. Brown. And that's where, and KJ Osborne, I put in that mix because of the opportunity that he will have. That is not a normal KJ Osborne ranking.
Right.
So that's where I'm at. I think we would all agree that you'd feel better about starting any one of those three guys over Tim Patrick.
Yeah.
So if you've been riding that, don't. I'd feel better about that than AJ Green, any of them. And I'd feel better about any of it than Laviska Shenault. Take your pick. Same thing with Traquan Smith, who was a thing for like 3 weeks. That's over. Feel better about any of that. So there are definitely things that are being played that any of those guys we just rattled off on the Lions, and then KJ Osborne for 1 week. I'd rather deal with that on a 1 week basis.
100%. So
from there, let's just keep right on going with we'll switch teams. We'll go to the Chargers. So Keenan Allen was added to the COVID list this week, and I believe they have already ruled him on Monday, and he's already been ruled out. That Keenan Allen is not playing, was the way that I was understanding that news report. Although it was
I don't think he's actually ruled out.
It was weird how it was written, but they wrote the Mike Williams one very differently on the wire, because they basically said Mike Williams has also been added to the COVID list as a close contact of Keenan Allen, but he could play with a negative COVID test. And I didn't see that written anywhere about Keenan Allen.
Yeah, Keenan Allen is vaccinated. So he was put on the list on Monday. He has to get 2 negative tests because he tested positive Monday.
And Mike Williams needs 1 because he was only a close contact.
Mike Williams is not vaccinated. So he has to have 5 days of isolation. But if he gets 1 negative test because he was only close contact, then he would be able to play and qualify for the game on Sunday.
Gotcha. My greater point with all of this is why we were talking about streaming wide receivers a moment ago. There's a very real world possibility that you're going to be dealing with no Keenan Allen or
there's a non-zero chance Jalen Guyton is the wide receiver 1 in LA this week.
How dare you disrespect Josh Palmer?
Josh Palmer hasn't been getting on the field.
Yeah, I know.
Josh Palmer's disrespecting.
I'm doing that I'm doing that for the people who participate in the Discord, Steve. That's all that's there for.
Doing that for the nerd.
I'm doing that for the nerd. Actually, in reality, the nerd and that whole conversation. But yeah, there's a very real chance that you're going to be dealing without any of your normal Chargers wide receivers, and both of those individuals were likely being started. Even with Mike Williams being kind of up and down and all over the place, probably was being started still, given the buys and the injuries.
Yeah.
So make other arrangements and reference back to what we were just talking about. We could expand that out for a moment too. Is there anybody else that was widely available? Because Amon-Ra St. Brown is obviously one of the ones. I looked it up. Reynolds was still widely available and still is. For you, I know that based on that, I can't imagine you've got any streamers that would be higher than 32 in your rankings. It's unlikely, at least.
Let's see.
He would likely be.
I would have to know who was on the wire. It would definitely be Josh Reynolds.
That's how I'm doing that. It's because Reynolds would be available. So and you got him at 32. So I'm like, there's probably nobody.
Maybe
higher.
Jamison Crowder is probably on your
Jamison
wire.
Crowder is still on the wire.
Since I'm the last of a dying breed, the Jamison Crowder truthers.
You and Jamison Crowder's mom.
Yep.
And even she's losing it. She's losing she doesn't come to the meetings anymore.
I know. She stopped bringing the cookies. And I was
know.
like, come on, Mom. Get it together.
It's Jamison Crowder who.
All right, let's see.
I'll acknowledge it. When Jamison Crowder plays, it's usually a great number for you. It's just a question of him being able to play and get through the game. So, but for this week, by the way, for the 1 week bet it all type of deal, yeah, I'd ride Jamison Crowder. Sure, why not? Against New Orleans, up and down, weird secondary that works when it wants to and doesn't when it doesn't, and when it doesn't, it really doesn't. But everything else is probably too highly rostered, except for maybe like Russell Gage.
Let's see. What would be available? Tim Patrick.
No,
we already talked about a little bit. We already
talked about that. Russell Gage available. That would be probably the highest.
Deontay Harris is an interesting one because he is the favored target, if I could speak English, of Taysom Hill. Rondale Moore, my boy, an interesting one on Monday Night Football, but you got to wait till Monday, and it's a tough matchup, and he's like fourth fiddle in that offense. So,
wasn't Deontay Harris suspended 2 days ago for a DUI? Was he? I believe so. I believe I'm double checking this because I remember reading a report on The Athletic, which I've actually now found. Saints wide receiver Deontay Harris suspended 3 games for DUI charge on December.
Oh, yep, it does say suspended. There you go.
All right, so there you go. No Deontay Harris.
So scratch that one then.
Scratch that off. No Deontay Harris. I'm glad.
KJ Osborne, who we talked about, is only 5% rostered right now.
Yeah. Russell Gage is the only guy available.
Jamison Crowder would be the next one after Josh Reynolds. He's 23% rostered. For me. No.
I'm double checking on something real quick.
I think I have. Yeah. Oh no, you're right.
35% rostered for Russell Gage-ish, I believe.
Yeah, and I have Russell Gage slightly higher. I have him at 30.
Yeah, it's kind of where that's neighborhood of where
slightly higher than Josh Reynolds.
So I'd say it's Gage and then Reynolds for you, and then for me, it's still probably be Reynolds, but I would just lower it like 6 spots to get to Reynolds, and that's kind of where it would go.
Yeah, for me in order, it would be Gage, Reynolds, and then Jamison Crowder.
Yeah, and I'd have that same way, and then you'd actually get to
and then Osborne and Amon-Ra St. Brown.
And then Amon-Ra St. Brown, would be the last choice. But those are the things that I think would be widely available. And if you needed a spot starter, I'd actually feel pretty good about Russell Gage, considering that since he's become the last man standing, which is effectively the last 2 starts, he's looking at an 18.2 and a 22 flat. So when he has the entire job to himself and it's just him and Kyle Pitts, Russell Gage has been, I believe it was a 22 flat. So he's been solid. Yeah. He's been solid.
And again, we can't just gloss over the fact that, like we've already talked about, if for whatever reason they don't clear the protocols and Keenan Allen and Mike Williams both miss this game, they are playing the Giants, and Jalen Guyton becomes the number 1 when he just had a 19-point game last week.
Yeah.
So, and that was with those guys on the field. I mean, that was from one huge touchdown. I'll give you that. But he still had 3 catches for 45 yards other than that big touchdown. So Jalen Guyton becomes the number 1 target on that offense against a terrible secondary. That's absolutely in flex consideration.
Yeah, 100%. Okay. So realistic, I guess we could continue on. We'll expand it out even more. There's another reason to talk about wide receiver streamers as coming off the huge week last week, T. Higgins has missed practice pretty much every day this week. He's been just DNP. And what they're saying is he needs to get at least 1 practice in or he's not playing. That's been the word on the street from the coaching staff is he has to at least get 1 full practice in before they will consider playing him on Sunday. So just one more reason to be looking at your wide receiver waiver wire this week, folks, because you might need some assistance. Start lining up backup plans because it's looking like it might be a little thin. Because in addition to that, another banged up wide receiver that you likely were starting or someone was in your league, Deebo Samuel has missed another practice. And it's looking more and more likely that Deebo Samuel is probably going to sit again this week. We had this conversation last week, and it turned out to be correct that you and I were in agreement. Brandon Ayuk was not the beneficiary in that game of the increased workload. So take that, internet.
Right.
And the other thing is that we were also correct again. George Kittle is the beneficiary of all of that extra volume.
Right.
That's not really worth rehashing.
Right.
We were just correct about it. So high five. And then all that really means is if Debo is out, it's just one more reason to reference what we've been talking about with wide receiver streamers. There are a lot of banged up wide receivers this week was kind of the theme. But pivoting away from that, there is a little bit of tight end, and we're just going to do this quickly because tight end matters so little that we don't even need to devote that much time to it. Darren Waller has missed another practice. I would consider him the highest of questionable. I find it very unlikely that he will play, to be honest, in that game. But he might. If he does, I guess start him. I'd be looking for other options either way, just to have something in my back pocket. I don't trust this. The whole Darren Waller.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on what you had already, right? Because he didn't play last week. So you already had a backup plan in place. It's just...
How good do you feel about it?
Was it Hunter Henry? Was it Mike Gesicki? Because that would be the only reason you'd have to find a new one this week. Otherwise, it's the same thing.
Well, or we'll talk about it in a second because circumstances have changed somewhere. We'll just go right into it here. So Logan Thomas, we all saw it. It's not really worth rehashing what happened. Bottom line, he's done for the year. You could argue about whether or not it was legal or correct or blah, blah, blah. The mechanism is done. They'll fight about it in the background. For fantasy purposes, all you need to know is that Logan Thomas came back, caught you a touchdown. That's why he's Logan Thomas. And now he's going to miss the rest of the year. So with that, Ricky Seals-Jones. We talked about this a few weeks ago. Yeah. He's actually returning from injury now.
Right.
I'm actually about that Ricky Seals-Jones life.
Sure.
If you're interested, if you need a streamer, if you don't want to go back to the well with Hunter Henry, and believe me, I completely understand why you'd be gun shy after what happened there.
Yeah.
Or frankly, I mean, I'd rather Tyler Conklin.
Mm-hmm.
That's the one that's very available. That's my number one, set it and forget it tight end streamer of the week. If you need a tight end and Tyler Conklin is available, that's my first choice. If for whatever reason that's not available, Ricky Seals-Jones moves up that list very rapidly. He's going to get that Logan Thomas workload. They've proven that to us before. And he can do about 80% of the things Logan Thomas can do. And in tight end, 80% of Logan Thomas would be very much a starter.
I have Conklin 11 and RSJ 12. So
yeah, there you go.
I mean, we were talking about it before when this injury first happened, the first injury to Logan Thomas. The fact that it was crazy. He played literally 100% of the snaps the first 3 weeks of the season. Nobody else in the league did that. And then he gets hurt, goes out. Ricky Seals-Jones comes in, and he plays 100% of the stuff.
Right.
They just play one tight end the whole time. They don't mix it up. There's no committee.
No, there's no blocking tight end, receiving tight end.
Right.
No. I mean, there is.
Yeah.
But they don't change roles. It's literally this. This is what we do.
And while he's had the job, when he was healthy, RSJ, he put up a 4 in that first game. But that was the game that Thomas got hurt.
It pressed into service. He wasn't projecting to start that week.
But the every week that he started, week 5 on, a 9.1, 15.8, 11.1, a 3.2, thereby a 6, and he got hurt in the game with the 6 and hasn't played since then.
That's right.
So he's going to be back this week, back to a full go. He's got a solid floor. He's got a tight end ceiling. It's a touchdown for a good week, and you don't get a touchdown, and it's a more reliable floor than most.
Yeah, so that's why he gets to 12. That's the bar for tight end, folks. It's gross. Beyond that, there's just one other thing. David Njoku was added to the COVID list. The only thing that matters about that is, do you have any interest in Austin Hooper a little bit more? Maybe. Yeah. No, me either. It's just something I noticed getting people kicking around on the internet that maybe Austin Hooper could do something.
No, Baker Mayfield has not utilized the tight ends at all in any way, shape, or form. It does not matter who is out there at tight end. He just doesn't throw it that way.
No, and my whole response to people around that conversation was, is Tyler Conklin available? Mm-hmm. Why am I having what league are you playing in where this is the conversation? Are you starting 2 tight ends? I
have Foster Moreau ranked ahead of Austin.
And that
Hooper.
Was also a disaster. So
exactly. That should tell you everything you need to know about Austin Hooper.
That's not for positive reasons. So, okay. Well, that wraps up, unless you have anything else that you want to go through, that really wraps up the non-tight end, the non-Taysom Hill running back segment of this. So if there's anything else you want to touch on, let me know. But I think we covered it, and I wanted to make sure we got through those wide receiver streamers, because I think that's the thing people are going to need assistance with this week more than anything.
Well, okay, yeah, we're going to talk about running backs here.
We're going to go into running back.
Yeah.
Yes.
Nope.
Okay, well, let's get right into running back then. Let's all take a moment and reset and take a deep breath, because this is long. So first we'll start with one that is actually just interesting, but it's just quick. So back with the Bears, David Montgomery is trending towards playing in this game. However, he is listed with a shoulder, groin, and glute injury. So yes, you heard me. So the man's junk is not doing well, apparently.
Mm-hmm.
Front side, back side, it's all bad.
Yeah.
All of it's bad.
Yep.
And also you got a bad shoulder to go with it. Now we know from experience that this man is a warrior.
Mm-hmm.
And that if anybody is capable of dealing with this particular set of injuries, it's probably David Montgomery. And he's going to play. But are you concerned about his workload? Because I am a little bit, candidly. They're going to kill him.
They are going to kill him.
They've proven willing to do that in the past. So, but are you a little worried that something might snap here? Like, I don't know. It's a little scary to have this many injuries.
I don't know that worries me. But if I'm a David Montgomery manager this weekend, what scares me more is the fact that the Packers have been really good against the run.
Mm-hmm.
So I think this is a bad matchup, and he's coming in beat up.
Well, and they're going to be blasting the Bears by 15, 16, 18,
like you better
points.
Hope that the Bear or that, you don't need a 20 from David Montgomery, because this is the week he's going to give you that solid 8. And you're feel really good about that.
You're really hoping what happens in this game, if you're starting David Montgomery, is that the Bears somehow manage to get to the 1 yard line, and David Montgomery gets you a little bunny touchdown.
Mm-hmm.
That's what you're hoping for here.
Yeah.
And then you get a 12 or something like that.
In the fourth quarter when they're losing 35-7.
Or on the opening drive of the game. Or on the opening drive of the game. And it's scripted or something.
Because that's either way. That's the 7. Yeah.
That's how you get it. That's how you start the game with
7-0 and then 35 unanswered.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. That's how it goes. So that's what you're concerned about. So just temper your expectations for Montgomery this week. And if you actually are in a position where you have really good running back depth, if I was in that weird scenario, like we had a friend who had 3 top 10 running backs the 1 year, I would actually have been giving the advice, hey, you sure you want to play Montgomery this week if he was my 3rd running back and I don't need him? Like, maybe I've got a wide receiver that might be in a little bit better standing.
Also,
not going to be for everybody.
You mentioned the injuries and the tough matchup. Like, matchup aside, dealing with all those injuries and the crazy workload that he gets and how involved he is on the offense, if he's available, Khalil Herbert, if he's on your waiver wire and you've got the space on your bench, fantastic stash, because we have seen if Montgomery goes out, Herbert instantly becomes a top 20 running back.
That's right. That's right. And it's just, he has very little in the way of value as long as Montgomery plays.
Mm-hmm.
However, yes, we have seen that very much 1-to-1 when Montgomery is not playing.
They give the entire workload to one guy now. It was a full-on committee with Tariq Cohen in there.
Yeah.
And then as soon as he died, because for all intents and purposes, he's dead.
Well, that's what I was going to say, is that
as soon as he died, it has been a full-on workhorse scenario in this offense.
And they tried to work in Damian Williams until he died.
Mm-hmm.
And then now it really is this. No, it's now just forget it. We have a bell cow.
Just
whoever it is, somebody goes
let
in
him
and
do the whole job. And if he gets hurt, the next guy up just does the whole job.
It eventually will be Ryan Null.
That's what it's
by himself against the world, like in there doing this job. It's going to be nuts. So just temper expectations.
It's Matt Nagy. They won't give it to Ryan Null. They'll make like Demir Bird a running back or something like stupid.
Try to do something like Cordarrelle Patterson.
Yeah, he'll make a new Cordarrelle Patterson.
Yeah, except way less successful than Cordarelle Patterson probably. Yeah, okay.
What are you, a 28-year-old wide receiver that's never succeeded?
Never had any real success.
Here you go, running back. Mm-hmm.
I'd argue with you. I'd argue with you, but there's too much precedent. There's just too much precedent to really argue against that. No, no self-respecting lawyer would want to take that case. It's just precedent.
And Demir Bird signs in Atlanta next year and becomes a top 10 running back.
After Cordarelle Patterson signs
a
real running back deal for a team like the Jets. Yeah, okay, sure. Maybe not the Jets is a bad example, but somebody desperate.
Is it? Is it a bad
No,
example?
because
Because that seems like a very Jets thing.
Because they're that incompetent.
Yep.
Then
Raiders.
Carolina
goes back to the Raiders.
Carolina, because they don't know what they're doing.
Exactly.
I can see that. Well, speaking of don't know what they're doing, we'll stop in with the Lions here, and we'll talk about one of the only things that could possibly matter as it relates.
How
to the
dare
Lions.
you? They're undefeated in December.
You know what? That's fair. That's fair. They are. I can't argue that either. That's another one that I can't argue mathematically. So why try?
There are 16 teams that can't
try?
claim that. Okay?
You know, technically, they're not even eliminated from the playoffs yet. It requires a series of horrible things to happen, but why not? It's all.
Right. We could go through it all, but it would take the remaining.
It would take the
20
minutes of the show, and just trust us. The math was done. That's a real stat, and it's earth-shattering. For $1, you can get quality information like that at patreon.com/important nonsense. Check it out. It's worth the dollar.
What a plug.
Deandre Swift. This is a vexing one for myself, and I'm sure actually for you as well, knowing some of the roster construction you have in the background. I really want Deandre Swift to play in this game, but I also am juxtaposing that against the idea that I'd also really rather have Deandre Swift healthy for a full playoff run here. So, you know, 6 in one hand, half to the other, I guess. But he's making improvements with the shoulder. He's very questionable for this week.
Yeah.
I think we've already covered this to death. Jamal Williams, if DeAndre Swift doesn't play, that's a thing. Is Jermar Jefferson a thing? Because now in the 2 times we've seen that, Jermar Jefferson manages to break these huge runs. It just scares me because it's not hugely pretty, but he somehow finds a way to rattle off a huge run. Both times he's been able to get on the field with no DeAndre Swift available for that game. He does take on some of the traditional running role because they don't want to give the whole workload to Jamal Williams. They'll kill him. So they do activate Jermar Jefferson. He's a healthy scratch when they don't. But both times Swift has missed the game, Jefferson has had a serviceable week. And running back is a nightmare. So my question to you is, would you be interested in Jermar Jefferson effectively breaking a huge play for you a third time against Denver? Because that's what you're banking on. Okay. When I put it to you that way, it sounds a little bit less attractive, right?
Well, I mean, just in general, I'm not seeing. Did he have one last week? It doesn't look like it.
I believe last week, didn't he finish like 9 for 100 and something?
No, he was 5 for 18 last week.
He was 5 for 18. Okay. All right. I got to see. That's why I wanted to double check that.
Are you thinking of Mike Boone?
It's entirely possible because he also doesn't have any value.
It's the same thing.
It was literally the same thing.
It's the same thing in a different jersey. And he used to be in the NFC North, so I could see how you would make.
No, I got it. I see what I did. It's
4 for 35. Mike Boone. No, that wasn't it.
But it's not Mike Boone. There was somebody who popped off, but it's not really super relevant because that individual is a one-week wonder type of thing. Really, it's just
Jamar Jefferson. Williams. Like I said, it's an interesting name to know because he's the backup at this point, as long as Swift is out. But that's about it. He doesn't hold any real value, especially in PPR, because he doesn't get involved in the passing game pretty much at all. The only reason he was involved in it in week 8 is because that was one of the weeks that Jamal Williams missed.
Right. Was also
and he kind of filled the Williams pass catching role. Whereas this past week, they didn't really utilize the pass catching from Jamal Williams because they were playing with the lead.
Yeah,
for
it was
most
weird.
of the game.
It was really strange.
Which never really has happened.
Except for this week when they probably will again because Denver's offense is completely done.
Yeah, but can they put up points against that defense? I don't think so. I think one of them ends up winning the game 13-10.
I was going to say, no, I think that game might legitimately be 6-3 at halftime.
Yeah.
So
somebody wins that game 13-10.
So we'll see what they decide to do, but it's going to be a nightmare. It's another game to not watch. So all right, just if you're counting on Swift, greater point here is do not worry. I would temper expectations on whether or not he's going to play this week. It's theoretically within the realm of possibilities, but I'd have a backup plan just like you did last week because I'm projecting.
I'm hoping he does not
play. I'm hoping
as
somebody who's already locked a playoff spot with Swift on my roster, just let him sit.
Yeah,
we don't need him this week. It's fine. And of course, Dan Campbell doesn't care what we think or say, so it'll all work itself out. But
yeah, we talked about that last week though. Is like they've already said he's the franchise. Preserve the franchise. They're going to be cautious with him.
Well, now they won a game.
Yeah.
So it's also like that monkey's off your back. You don't have to worry about it as much.
Yep.
Speaking of weird things, just weird things. James Robinson, subject of much conjecture about the news story around I don't even know. Like, here's the thing. We're here to do fantasy analysis, and I could spend 20 minutes talking about like the inner workings of Urban Meyer's brain as it relates to like what that whole thing was about. It's Steve's waving off, our producer.
Yeah.
He doesn't need a water break.
Mm-hmm.
Our producer's very concerned about people staying hydrated.
Obviously. You've been reading Jack's pamphlets about how Urban Meyer is a grifter.
Well, Jack has some interesting ideas, so I
He brings
subscribe
up
to
good
his
points.
newsletter. Well, I subscribe to Jack's weird newsletter, but also I'm a weird Urban Meyer is a horrible person truther for years, going back to when I used to write about college and talk about college.
There's a lot of evidence.
There's a lot of evidence. Look, no, normally I wouldn't say that because it would be considered slander, except I have so much evidence that I could actually prove it in court.
Yeah.
So in fact, it was proven in court, so I don't even have to. I just have to reference precedent. Mm-hmm. So it's very convenient this way that as it relates to Urban Meyer, I can just say what I want.
Right.
And it's like, it really works out that way. It's great. So the whole thing here is, what is going on with James Robinson? They decide to bench him for reasons that are highly suspect. They're going to count on Carlos Hyde. He's hurt. He's not hurt. Maybe I'll kick it to you to break down Jack's weird pamphlets, because I think that was a good way to set that
up. Look, so essentially what happened was James Robinson fumbled in week 12 against Atlanta in a game that they were actually competitive in and had a chance to win. And he fumbled late. And that kind of turned the tide in that game, and they end up losing. So they come back this week against the Rams, and he had 8 carries for 24 yards and then fumbled again and gave away a turnover in their own side of the field to the Rams. And they just started to put it on him. And he never saw the field again. He got benched for the rest of the game for fumbling in back-to-back outings.
Benched for Carlos Hyde.
So at this point, I feel like he's probably still the starter. Maybe. If you're playing James Robinson, though, I mean, I don't know. I'm not starting Carlos Hyde. I still don't believe he's going to get enough workload to even be in flex consideration.
No.
And
it's
even,
Carlos Hyde.
Here's the reality of the situation, too. He came back from the injury, James Robinson, that is. In PPR formats, he has not been utilized in the passing game nearly as much as you would like. Like, he has been utilized some, but just the checkdowns in general with Trevor Lawrence have not been there. It's why Laviska Shenault hasn't done anything. It's why the running backs aren't doing much.
All the checkdown stuff was going to Dan Arnold.
Yeah, and
then Dan Arnold got hurt. What
has been happening is, and it's so obnoxious, like we've got Marvin Jones on that team who we love.
Yes.
You've got Laviska Shenault, who I loved all offseason. James Robinson, who was a darling last year, and this year has come in and been replaced by Carlos Hyde. And Trevor Lawrence has been throwing the ball to Jamal Agnew.
Not anymore.
And then when Jamal Agnew got hurt, he's replaced him with Laquan Treadwell.
Right. Oh,
what is going on?
No, that's the other one. Look, that's right. You heard that. For those who maybe don't know who Laquan Treadwell was, because I would actually forgive you for that. Vikings former 4th receiver that never mattered and had one good game in 2017 and was a fantasy thing for 6 seconds. Laquan Treadwell. They thought so little of him that they never extended him in Minnesota. Like, I shouldn't have said that when you were drinking. I was like, oh my God, Steve
went down the wrong pipe immediately.
Steve almost choked. So yeah, I'd forgive you for not knowing who Laquan Treadwell was, because it was a thing for 4 years ago for 2 weeks. Laquan Treadwell in fantasy circles. That's it. They thought so little of him in Minnesota. They didn't even try to extend him. They just let him walk. And then they went with KJ Osborne and whatever other schlock that they have. It doesn't matter.
My point was Chad Beebe. That's
a good one too. Yeah.
He had 12 carries for 57 yards against Indy. Again, a close game they lost. And he ends up getting an 18.4 because he fell in the end zone.
That's right.
They play San Francisco and get blown out. He scored a touchdown. Even with the touchdown, he only had an 11.8.
That's really hard to do.
Against Atlanta,
effective.
He does not score, but he has 86 yards rushing because it's Atlanta. He puts up a 12. And then this past week, he gets benched and only has a 2. So he has not been great anyway. He's been borderline RB2 at that, more of a flex over the last few weeks. And now you're telling me there's a possibility he could get benched mid-game. Like, if I've got a backup plan If I have a better option than James Robinson, I'm absolutely doing it.
I think that's the analysis here, is that if I happen to have some other kind of option, I'm going to be looking long and hard at exploring it, because God forbid that he fumble again, because then you're done for the day.
Well, like, okay,
that's it.
Here's a prime example of where we are with James Robinson right now. These are 3 guys: A.J. Dillon,
go to the rankings here,
Kareem Hunt, and Tony Pollard. 3 guys that aren't even the RB1 on their team. I would start ahead of James Robinson this week.
Yeah, it's getting to that point. It's absolutely getting to that point,
because those guys have the burst, they have goal line touches, and they have pass catching that can give them the points to finish in the top 20. I don't buy any of that for James Robinson.
Well, and I'll give you another one where, okay, I know it was a little disappointing last week with Jamal Williams, but if you picked up Jamal Williams last week and you have James Robinson, for example, I would play Jamal Williams over James Robinson, like, not too
even
much
in a tough matchup.
Yeah. Even in a tough matchup, even coming off the 9 that he had.
Yeah.
Because that obviously would change if Swift was to play. I wouldn't stand by that. I would change that. But as we sit here right now, given what we just said, because I agree with the names you just said, and I just wanted to add that one as well. Like,
and I
Jamal
say all of this
Williams,
knowing full well that James Robinson had a 22 against Tennessee in week 5.
That's
I'm
right.
fully aware of that, and I don't care.
Yeah.
Because outside of that 4-week stretch that he had from weeks 3 to 6, when he had 20 plus in every game, he has done nothing this entire year, and it's only gotten worse.
Yeah. And I'll acknowledge Tennessee's defense is hot garbage. Like, it's hot
they're a lot
garbage.
better now than they were at the beginning of the season.
Yeah, and it's still hot garbage, but it's like, even with that, I still think Jacksonville's going to be trailing.
Yeah.
So I don't like anything about this. The James Robinson thing makes me very, very nervous, especially given Jack's poorly Xeroxed pamphlets that go even deeper down the rabbit hole of the conspiracy theory against James Robinson vis-a-vis Urban Meyer and what is going on. There's just too many markers on this. If I'm looking to clinch a playoff spot, or if I'm looking to play for a seed, I don't want to. I'd rather not. But it's funny you bring up Tony Pollard, because Tony Pollard's been having the season that makes people get even louder about the free Tony Pollard conversation. That was already a thing, as we've covered many times, and the volume's getting turned up on that in the background a little bit. However, he was held out of practice today, and normally I think people would rightly say, Neil, who cares? It's Wednesday. Well, it's notable here because Tony Pollard, that is his first missed practice all year. They do not give Tony Pollard the day off. He is still young enough that they don't give him veteran rest days, and he doesn't miss practices. He practices every week. So it was actually noted this is his first missed practice all year. So it becomes a little more noticeable when he suddenly misses a practice for the first time. I'm not really worried about this. I'm not going to adjust him in my rankings unless maybe he misses another practice tomorrow. This is just kind of raising the antenna. Check in on this on Friday. If he's back at practice tomorrow, I don't care at that point. His wheels up, not worried about it, move forward as per normal. But if he misses today, tomorrow, and it's just something to monitor, because I think they're going to, I don't know that they're going to want to give him the full workload if he's actually more beat up than we might have thought he was at the start of the week. So,
you mean his full workload? His
full workload, excuse me. Yeah, I don't think they're going to want to do that. And I don't know what they're
I mean, they seem pretty content letting Zeke hobble around on the field out there. So I think, if anything, they're preserving Tony Pollard, giving him time off in practice in the event Zeke goes down. He's 100%.
Because you're going to need,
you need one of them healthy.
Well, so you need something for this playoff run you're working on in real football. Their playoff run that they want.
You need somebody healthy. So if Zeke is going to play through this because he can't make it worse,
because he's the $62 million man,
then I absolutely would be resting Tony Pollard. Why not?
Absolutely. Speaking of guys who might need a little break, given how much work they've had to do, Elijah Mitchell.
I thought you were going to say me. Yeah, you're right.
Oh, I didn't know you were in the concussion protocol, although it would explain a lot.
Since like 2006.
It would explain a lot about the last several years. And I'm sure your wife actually would be very much like, I've noticed.
She's the one that put me in it.
Yeah, that's true. Well, I told you not to say that stuff to her. I warned you.
She had it coming.
No, she's got a hell of a right hook. It's more than like it's. But Elijah Mitchell is in the concussion protocol. He's also still nursing the knee. He entered the concussion protocol last week. It's a little concerning that he's still in the concussion protocol at this point, but that takes some time to get cleared. He's also still got the inflamed knee. He is not a lock to play Sunday. Within that, Jeff Wilson flared up his knee, and he's the true backup to Elijah Mitchell at this point. He is. I could not justify any world of playing Jeff Wilson unless I knew for sure that everybody else had been ruled out. And even then, I'd be like, maybe you get an 8. So Jeff Wilson doesn't matter. He only matters in the sense of where I'm going here, which is the only one left healthy is JaMychal Hasty, and that's with an asterisk. So they'd probably have to activate Trey Sermon at that point, right? But there's no way I could justify ever putting Trey Sermon.
Pretty sure Trey Sermon is also hurt still.
Yeah, he might, and that's the thing, he might still be hurt. So the question becomes that I have for you: if we got
they signed Brian Hill,
they did, and I think
because
so
they're
little.
that thin and desperate.
I think so little of Brian Hill. So it's like
no, I'm not saying Brian Hill matters. I'm just saying they signed Brian Hill because they have nothing else.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
So the only thing that I say is we've seen JaMychal Hasty have interesting up and down sort of quasi value as a 1 week spot streamer. Are you all interested in that? If we got confirmation that everybody else basically wasn't playing, if it's him and Brian Hill, still no.
No.
Okay. Just checking in on that.
Still no.
Just checking in on that because I could see it there. But I'd have to be so unbelievably desperate. I'd have to be.
I'd
so
have to
desperate.
be. I don't know. It's
Dontrell Hilliard would have to be gone. And we're in the 30s at that point.
Realistically, if you're talking about this same conversation that we're having right now about JaMychal Hasty because everybody else is hurt, and we're having this conversation in week 9 because I'm desperate in buys. Okay, I'd consider it because he's the guy and I don't have anything else. I can play him at flex. Okay.
Sure.
When we're talking about week 14, which is potentially either the first week of your playoffs or the last week for you to earn a playoff berth, there's a 0% chance I'm relying on JaMychal Hasty to get
That's fair. Well, I'd have to be really, 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 really desperate to get there. So that's why it's worth bringing up, just because I noticed he made a lot of like waiver wire lists for various outlets and things like that. And I was like, I'd rather.
Yeah, again, it's just because there's literally nothing else. But
well, that's what I was saying. But even within the nothing, I know, but I'd rather deal with Dontrell Hilliard. Like, if you want to talk about things that are nothing, like I'd rather deal with that. Roll my dice there. Rex Burkhead, like things like that would still exist, and like Sony Michel's probably long gone.
Yeah.
But
look, the one that I've rolled out in a couple of leagues is Amir Abdullah.
Yeah, that's another one that I was going to bring up. So Amir Abdullah is lower on the list for me, but he would qualify as part of this list.
Yeah.
So it's definitely one to know. And I will say, as far as things that haven't disappointed you yet, this year, Amir Abdullah. So if you're looking for, so for you with Amir Abdullah, where did you end up with him being ranked, broadly speaking?
I have Amir Abdullah at 32, just ahead of Tevin Coleman.
Okay. Yeah, fair enough. No, fair enough.
So Amir Abdullah joined Carolina in week 8 against, lo and behold, Atlanta. And it was his first game with Carolina, and Christian McCaffrey was still out hurt. So it was Chuba Hubbard and Amir Abdullah. And Amir Abdullah had 8 carries for 31 yards. He also had 5 targets and caught 3 of them for 35 yards. So he gave you a 9.6 in PPR scoring. Then Christian McCaffrey came back. And even with McCaffrey back, he got 5 targets in week 9, 4 targets in week 10. They gave Christian McCaffrey a full workload in week 11. That worked out really well. And then they gave Abdullah 6 targets again last week against Miami. So he has been the pass catching back while Chuba Hubbard has barely been involved. Fun fact, Like I said, there was the one game where he basically wasn't on the field at all, was getting no snaps because they gave so many to McCaffrey. So 4 of the 5 games, the 4 that he's been utilized, Amir Abdullah has 24 targets. Chuba Hubbard has played the entire season and has 29. So there you go. Like, he is way more involved in the passing game. When we're talking about PPR, Amir Abdullah is a guy that, just like Dontrell Hilliard, has value and is a flex option.
Yeah. Well, it's funny that you bring up, I don't want to spend too much time on Dontrell Hilliard because I think we know about Dontrell Hilliard. He had a nice game, then the bye.
And this is kind of the Jags.
And this is kind of the litmus test for this because they have not been able to settle on a running back situation.
Yeah.
So if they go back to the well on Hilliard, look, there's every chance they will.
Yeah.
He's a flex running back as well. Same neighborhood as these other guys we're talking about. But you mentioned Tevin Coleman, and I want to talk about Tevin Coleman. He's actually the next one on my list. Okay. And this will be the 3rd week in a row that I'm recommending Tevin Coleman, and he's paid me off the last 2. So for everybody who wanted to poo-poo this, he's staring down a 10 and an 11 the last 2 weeks. And as far as PPR running back goes, if you're looking for borderline RB2 break glass in case of emergency situations, I will take a 10-point floor over the last 2 weeks if I knew I was getting a 10. And he did one of those with Wilson, which was the concerning part, was what would happen if Wilson got in there. Now, there's one fly in the ointment here, and I've got him literally like right next to Amir Abdullah. So it's funny that you brought that up too. So I was like, yeah, they're very much in the same neighborhood. Tevin Coleman is in the concussion protocol. So as long as he clears it, which they're saying looking like he will, but you never know, it's the concussion protocol. But they're saying he's going to play, assuming he clears it, and he has been serviceable, as I pointed out, with Carter hurt, even with Wilson in there. They got to have somebody do this job. It hasn't been super sexy, but I'm looking at double digits, and maybe I get lucky and he falls in the end zone.
Yeah, see, the fly in the ointment for me with Tevin Coleman is that, yes, he has had 2 productive weeks, and he got a 9 and a 10.7, but he did it against Houston and Philadelphia. And this week he's taking on New Orleans, who's the number 3 rush defense.
That's fair.
That's the fly in the ointment for me. So it's a horrible matchup, and he has not been spectacular. He's been okay.
Yeah, but that's where we are on the running back.
But my point is, he's been okay against terrible defenses. Sure, now he's playing a really good defense.
And we'll see what the test
if okay was his ceiling, my goodness. I don't know.
Look, I'd still prefer Amir Abdullah. Don't get me wrong. I'm just saying, if you're looking at guys right in that neighborhood, it's Abdullah.
You're in desperation territory.
Well, yeah, but that's running back waivers right now.
Yeah.
You're not looking at that list because your team's healthy, or you're happy about it. It's all bad down there.
You're dealing with buys.
Well, or maybe you have Damian Harris on bye. Sure.
Yeah.
Like, it's theoretically possible.
Okay.
And then just to round out the list here, we'll go through this relatively quickly because there's not too much to talk about. Circling all the way back to the beginning of the show, talking about Taysom Hill. Hey, Alvin Kamara is on track to return this week. Yay. There was much rejoicing.
We talked about that last week as well, the fact that he was basically healthy enough to go on the Thursday game last week, but in an abundance of caution, they wanted to hold him out and give him the extra 10 days so he could have a full week of practice before coming back. And that's what they did. They held him out of that game, and now he's got a full week of practice. He was a full go today. So fully expect him back on Sunday.
We're only talking about this because, yes, we're confirming he's going to play. And then secondarily within that, we've talked about this forever. Whenever Taysom Hill gets the start, Alvin Kamara is historically a little bit less attractive. Although his pass catching numbers are down this year anyway, it doesn't seem to matter as much, especially when you get into the next piece of news, which is Mark Ingram was added to the COVID list and is now not a lock to play in this game. So it might be a big old bag of Alvin Kamara.
Well, that's what I was going to say too. Like last year, the issue, we went through the numbers in the offseason, but the issue was that when Taysom Hill was playing, Latavius Murray put up literally the same numbers. He was just as involved, whether it was Drew Brees or Taysom Hill. It did not matter. Whereas with Alvin Kamara, he was relying on Drew Brees throwing him those checkdowns. He wasn't being utilized as a between the tackles running back. This season, he has been the between the tackles running back, and they've only been using guys like Tony Jones and Dwayne Washington and now Mark Ingram as the change of pace guy to give him a breather. And that, again, in case of emergency, type guy to fill in for Kamara when he's not
And in the
there.
case of Mark Ingram, occasionally they'll give him a goal line work or two because it's Mark Ingram and that's what he does.
Right.
Occasionally.
So again, now I believe the biggest issue for Alvin Kamara is Taysom Hill potentially becoming the goal line back and stealing those opportunities. But we talked about it at the very beginning of the show, so we got a nice bookend here. But the fact that he can't throw the ball very effectively. So you're not going to have deep throws. You've got no Deontay Harris, apparently. That was news to me, so good nugget by you.
Yeah.
But over the middle, short range, that's going to end up being his check down option is Alvin Kamara.
Yeah, because you got no Trotman. And you got no Trotman still. He's on IR.
They're going to end up running the ball a ton because they're going to avoid passing the ball.
Because you got Traquan Smith, who doesn't do the underneath stuff very well, if he even does it at all. And you got the other option would be Little Jordan Humphrey, or Lil, excuse me, I always butcher this. Little Jordan Humphrey, who they'll give it a shot. And that really wraps it up, except for one last note on our way out the door, because this came in right at the end of the show sheet. They just published it right before we started the show. Dalvin Cook will be officially questionable for tomorrow's game. He is a game time decision. So within that, I think we'll give our I won't speak for you, but I think we'll probably end up giving our normal advice here, which is if Dalvin Cook is playing and you're trying to clinch a playoff spot and you have Dalvin Cook, he's probably playing for you.
Yeah, that's the unfortunate reality of it is if Dalvin Cook plays, you kind of have to play him because your backup option was probably Alexander Mattison.
Probably.
And you can't put Mattison in the game hoping that he takes the touches. Now, there was an exact scenario like this when Dalvin Cook was healthy and active in the game and sat there on the sideline and did nothing. And Alexander Mattison was the workhorse and people started Dalvin Cook and he took a 0. So it happened last season. Could we do a deja vu here all over again?
That's why it's worth bringing up because we've actually
possible, but you have to take that risk.
It literally happened, and what I'm here to tell you is it doesn't matter. You're going to have to bite that bullet and deal with it again. This is the reality that this is the bed you made when you spent that like number 2 overall pick more than likely on Dalvin Cook, and now you're going to lay in it. And you want to know why you're going to lay in it? Because you'll never live with yourself if you don't play Dalvin Cook. And he gets a 40. Yeah. You will never. It's like you'll look at yourself in the mirror differently forever. You'll never trust your own judgment again. It's a nightmare. You don't want to live like that. Never bench one of your studs. You just hope that if you're nervous about it, that they rule him out before the game, and then you can just play Madison with confidence. Right. So you hope that the Vikings do a solid for you here and make that decision for you, but. I don't know. Given where the Vikings are in their actual NFL season, I think they're going to, if Dalvin Cook's available, they're probably going to try and ride it because historically that's
probably
so. And they still, I think that they're going to try and go to the playoffs despite what happened to them last week. So I wish them luck in that endeavor. But as I posted in our Discord as we closed the show, that was the most quintessential Vikings thing ever. Blowing that game. # that's so Vikings.
Yep. It
just losing that game for no reason was just so Vikings. Historically,
100%.
It was amazing.
100%.
So, Steve, I think that's it, man. I think we've helped everybody get their news and get their lineup set, at least from a preliminary side here, and then obviously check in for the Friday show. But did you have any other parting thoughts, comments, public concerns, public outcries?
Well, public outcries are always my favorite. No, again, just check in with the show tomorrow during halftime, locked in with me, Vishal, and Mason. And then, of course, we've got the Friday show, Friday Night Insights with, I'm not sure if Jordan will be back this week. That is a fantastic question. I think it may be Mike again. Pretty sure. Should be Mike, Jack, Jordan, and they're going to be joined by John Helkamp. So,
nice. They actually
excited
worked
about
that out.
that.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. I didn't know they actually finalized that.
Yeah. So, yep.
Nice guest spot on Friday. That'll be fun.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, it'll be very interesting and should be good. Should be a good time. So we got a lot of content coming your way here at Important Nonsense. Patreon.com/Important Nonsense. There you go, folks. How about you, Neil? Public outcries at all?
Public outcries. Could my front lawn have more goose poop on it? I guess that's not really an outcry. It's more of an observation. I'd like an answer, though.
Right. All right, Seinfeld. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd like an answer on that if possible. Get that to me at nonsense_Neil. And or join our Patreon for $1. answer that question for me directly on there, folks.
Answer it there, yeah.
Yeah, go ahead and answer that there. And I will just say, welcome back, Alvin Kamara. We miss you every time you go away. Every time you go away. Oh, it's so nice to have you back.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you everybody for watching, and we'll be back next week into the playoffs. Playoffs? That's right, Jim Mora. The playoffs.
Playoff.
But until then, keep up the nonsense.
Music for this podcast is provided by Lee Rosevere. I'm Tim Kitzrow from NBA Jam and NFL Blitz, and you can find all the guys at ImportantNonsense.com. Kaboom!